Welcome to the Banff World Media Festival. Your session is about to begin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Tom Mazur, co-head of Shaftesbury's brand new U.S. office that we set up 9 months ago. And welcome to this very interesting and topical panel on web-based content. You're going to hear from an impressive group of panelists and leaders in the digital space on issues that many of us are focused on as we work to extend our content, new content, to the web and other platforms. At Shaftesbury, we are in the development and production business of digital content as well as broadcast television, and it is an increasingly significant part of our business, the web content. Over the past year, we've expanded our slate of multi-platform series to include series on web-based content series and on apps as well. So the topics this panel is discussing are critical for the business at hand on the web series. I'd like to introduce Marc Hustvedt.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I worked on that. He's head of strategic development at Chill. Marc?
Great. Well, thank you, guys, and welcome. And thanks for sticking around and sort of braving the rain to come out today. I'm Marc Hustvedt from Chill. I won't plug myself really too much, except we're a social video platform launched in January. You can share videos from all over the internet with your friends and see what they're watching. So on my Chill page today, you'll see a video about Bill Clinton's new diet and a bunch of GoPro videos that I shared. But I have a terrific panel here, and I don't want to sort of butcher the introductions too much. I will let them introduce themselves. But I do want to sort of frame the discussion today. This is the new economics of web-based entertainment. So we're going to try to frame it within the basic tenets of economics. So as if you remember from old econ days, supply curve meets the demand curve, the market sets the price for a good. So we're going to kind of frame the discussion in the supply side. We'll look at many of my panelists here today are producing content for the web and spending millions of dollars to do so. In fact, on the panel today, we have about $250 million in original production dollars represented for 12 months. And I mean, honestly, just a few years ago, it was hard to get $1 million of production together on a panel. So really, it's impressive where the industry is today. And then we'll look at the demand side. We'll start to look at what are the consumers demanding and what are the brands demanding. And we know on the internet that is not always the same thing. So all right, without further ado, I will let you guys introduce yourselves, your name, what you do and what you oversee. Go for it.
All right, Brian Hunt. I'm the head of creative development at Yahoo. So I oversee all of our original programming. So we have an internal studio, and there's someone who heads up our studio at Yahoo, and we have probably about 40 shows running on Yahoo across our network at any time. And we work with a lot of third parties and developing across slates of programming that we launched our first in October, which was a women's lifestyle slate, comedy slate that came out in February, and in July our men's lifestyle slate comes out. So I head up the development of those shows.
My name is Aimee Carlson. I'm from Universal Cable Productions, which is a full-service television studio within NBCUniversal. The studio has produced television content primarily for Sci-Fi and USA for the past 4 years, and in December we launched our digital studio. I'm focused on original content exclusively for the digital space, as well as supporting our television shows with derivative programming for the web.
Scott Nocas. I run distribution and marketing for Vuguru. So specifically, we are producing this year over 10 100-plus minute pieces of content that we distribute globally around the world with partnerships with Yahoo, Content Media, AOL, and many others. Rogers Media is actually one of our investors. And I also oversee, we have one of the premium YouTube channels with a partnership with Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel Comics, and I oversee that as well.
I'm Barrett Garese. Actually, as of Friday, I am the former director of content partnerships at Blip Networks. Prior to that, I ran a consulting company focusing on entertainment and government entities that worked with television and film companies on the entertainment side, and Department of Defense, DARPA, and the Congressional Commission for the Prevention of Weapons of Mass Destruction, Proliferation, and Terrorism on the government side. And then prior to that, I helped create United Talent Agency's online division.
So I'm Jonathan Ford. I work for Content Media Corporation, which is a distributor working in the film and television space, but also which has carved out a bit of a niche in getting involved in digital content distribution. So working with established independent producers like Vuguru and taking their properties out into the international market and looking at how we can monetize them through distribution on secondary platforms, television, online, outside their originating territory, as it were.
I'm Kelly DiGregorio. I've been doing business development at YouTube since 2007, and over that time the roles changed a bit, but I've worked on ad-supported distribution, including catch-up TV and film distribution, live streaming, movie rentals, and original programming.
Terrific. Well, thank you guys. I mean, obviously, wide range of both distribution, original production, and major video platforms. I did do some research on stats. You guys can all find these online as well, so I won't bore you. Except to say, I mean, first, latest ComScore numbers has 83.5% of the internet, the U.S. internet audience is watching online video, and that's pretty consistent around the world. And what really strikes me is I've always been watching that duration number. The average duration of the online video content was 6.4 minutes, and the average video ad was 0.4 minutes. Both of those have gone up dramatically. And then I also looked at Canada. ComScore also had some data on the sort of the global markets. Canada actually has the highest number of videos watched per user. In a monthly basis, it's about 303 per user. And in the US, it's about 286. So Canadians love online video as well. And so I've been learning a whole lot about the Canadian market this week. And it's very consistent with our friends down south. So really, let's talk a little bit about where we are in terms of supply. There has been a massive amount of investment put in the last year or so. Of course, with YouTube announcing its new original channels, that's about 150 million or so. No one ever really gives us a real number. But if you can share, so actually I'll start with you, Kelly. You guys made a significant investment in original content, unprecedented. What drove you guys to do that?
I think what drove us to do it, we really wanted to help incubate. I mean, one question we get a lot is whether we are a media company and we're producing media. We're not. We've gone to a number of very talented and trusted producers, and we're trying to set up kind of a virtuous cycle, incubating content where they can, and then helping in the sales efforts where they can then turn around and keep putting money into the system, keep producing content for the web. I think another interest for us in specifically the channels initiative, interesting you bring up the ComScore, session time. I think we're interested in YouTube and growing session time. Obviously people are visiting YouTube because they are, people are forwarding them links to videos, check out this video, it's funny, or this is interesting. But session time is something we want to grow. It was important for us when we were considering what we were going to fund, that we weren't just funding specific shows or specific series. They needed to be channels. They needed to be very thematic and have kind of a robust programming set up behind them so that people will go there, they may watch a web series, then they may watch a talk show, they may watch kind of the behind the scenes footage. It has to be kind of a package that's playing to specific interests.
And this was spread across many content verticals,
It was.
many different channels.
Yep.
Got it. And there's so announced channels so far is about 100 or so?
About 100. And they've been launching a different timeline. We have some sports channels that we're launching in the spring. And we have other channels that have launched and will be launching into the fall.
Great. We'll shift down to the other side of the table. Yahoo been producing a number of new originals. It seems like you got your slate increases every quarter. Where's your head at today in terms of what you're producing? You've had some major hits in the TV recap show Primetime in No Time, celebrity gossip around OMG Now, but now you're starting to dive deep into, like YouTube, grabbing big Hollywood names and saying, let's make something premium for the internet.
Right. Yeah, we do. We will continue to make the short form kind of news and entertainment video. We know our audience likes that, and we will can drive a lot of traffic to it. But we also want to build big premium franchise shows. We just launched Burning Love a week ago, which is from Red Hour, which is Ben Stiller's production company. Stars Ken Marino from The State, Ken Jeong, Kristen Bell, a lot of great comics, and it's a parody of The Bachelor. So it has kind of a little bit of the cool factor, but it could not really get more broad with a parody of kind of the lowest denominator show on television. So, and it's done really well. It's about 4 million views or so in a week. And we think it's a show that we know that it's a big premium tentpole show. We know that it aligns with interests of our audience loves, but at the same time, we're really, it's a scripted, you can see this on television, even in film. So what we want to do, though, is take these big shows and have them live contextually within Yahoo. So Burning Love, there's tie-ins to OMG when Jennifer Aniston appears in it. There's tie-ins to Shine and our dating site, television with The Bachelor. So we can really have these kind of programs live across all of our properties.
Gotcha. I'll jump to Scott in the middle. Vuguru has been producing scripted content for a really long time on the internet. Even I'd say before it was the thing to do. You guys were making big bets. Michael Eisner was a proponent of producing for the web even in 2006, 2007. Mm-hmm. What's working for you guys in terms of what have you seen that, I mean, you have sort of a different model. You're not throwing it on a major platform and driving pre-roll ads to it. You're launching properties that then can be taken into individual markets.
I think it's been a mix of things, but I think, driven from Michael on down is finding content that has a great hook and is standalone as kind of a high concept idea that can fit a broader audience. It's not targeting ultra niche. While we do have deals with, for instance, Yahoo, we just launched our most recent series and did very well. Did 6 million views in the first 4 weeks.
What was the name?
Little Women, Big Cars. And it was targeted toward the audience, but it was still 25 to 54 women. And it was designed to be approachable for men and women. And so we saw great success. But I'd say it's, for us, being very focused on what's the concept, being controlled on our budgets so that it can be profitable for the company, for the talent, for everyone involved, and then working really closely for the distribution partners. Whether it's content media on the international side, we're seeing great success, or whether it's some of our domestic partners. It's really having that kind of laser focus on, we know this is the right budget, the right idea, and then being committed to making it.
Since this is an economics discussion, we're going to come back to budgets. Because and everybody, everyone wants to know, how much per minute are we spending? How much per minute are we making? I mean, what are the basic breakdowns? If we don't have to get specific on every project, even though I'm going to push you. So just be prepared. Aimee, I'd love to know where UCP is thinking. What is a UCP show, and what's sort of on the slate?
Well, I think that UCP sees an opportunity in companies like Yahoo getting invested in the high-quality scripted content space, and knows that as a television production company, we're capable of delivering that content. But similarly to Vuguru, we're focused on the storytelling and focused on the character and finding ways to produce compelling content that we can manage the risks on by keeping the budgets low, but focusing first on storytelling and in character as both being great storytelling for the web and also IP incubation for our television studio. So we'll be working with programming like genre programming that travels well overseas, but also maybe there's a life for that with our partner Sci-Fi Network. Just one example.
Do you have a fiction, nonfiction breakdown? Or?
I would say we're primarily focused on fiction, scripted fiction.
Okay.
I think that there's tremendous opportunity in the unscripted market, particularly in the genre space. The studio's strength is in scripted content, and we'll be continuing that in the digital space.
Great, terrific. Barrett, I can always turn to you to give it straight. What are you seeing? I mean, at this point, you're unattached to a formal production entity, so you have the liberty of being an observer. What's really working today of what's getting produced in terms of content?
I love getting to be the opinionated asshole. So a lot of what I think is working is the stuff that specifically does not intend to feel like television or film. And I know that we've talked about this before, but the idea that by making a shorter, cheaper version of television and then putting it up on the internet, it's going to make it an online property, I think is false. I think that there are elements that should be expected from an audience standpoint and from a production standpoint in online content. And by not fulfilling those elements, you're not actually creating online content. You're just creating television content that you're distributing online. And I think that those are two distinctly different things. I think that Hulu is built on the latter. And I think that a lot of the channel initiative of the YouTube's doing is built on the former. I think that if you look at a lot of what they're doing, they made very smart investments into the types of content that were you to pick it up and translate it to television would feel totally inappropriate. And from an audience perspective, what that means when I'm watching it is that I know that I'm watching the best possible variant of this piece of content. I'm not watching a subpar version. I'm not watching a version that someone made because they couldn't sell it as a TV pilot. But I'm watching something that was developed, produced, and released specifically with the content experience that I am having right now in mind.
Great.
Not to put too fine of a point on it.
We will come back to you for more specifics on this. Jonathan, I'd love to, you see a different side of the market. You are taking this out to, you're taking properties traditionally that were launched in digital, I mean, as well as television, but let's focus today on digital, that had a life, maybe built a fan base, and then taking them into international markets. Is it healthy? Is there more demand that you're seeing today?
Well, I think there is more demand. I think the key thing with any property is to understand what the aspirations are for monetizing at the beginning. If it is being created for a specific platform or a specific brand, is meant to be something that's very online in its focus, then the additional distribution and monetization opportunities are probably more limited because it's been created for that specific platform, that specific brand. If you're creating something where the story is maybe more of the lead, as Vuguru are doing, which is why we love working with Vuguru, the whole emphasis is around the story, the whole emphasis is around the entertainment experience. And the idea that is like any traditional TV series, is that something that's going to appeal to different audiences in different territories. So that's something we're keen to work on, is those type of properties where the story and the entertainment experience is at the center. And it's in a format which you can then take and license to other platforms and other territories, to other audiences. One of the things we do with Vuguru is we ensure that the properties we receive have a multi-platform format. So there may be a short-form focus for online or mobile, but there's also maybe a long-form format which suits the TV. And a great example is The Booth at the End, which obviously was very successful on Hulu. But that went out internationally beforehand with channels like FX, and it had a short-form version for their online site and a half-hour version for TV. And FX in the UK, for example, I saw ratings for The Booth half-hour version that nearly matched Walking Dead, which was quite significant. So from my point of view, in this space, there is an appetite on the international market and also in the US market to license existing properties that have been produced, as long as they've been produced with that story being at the center. That's not to say that you shouldn't produce content for a specific platform, for the YouTube channels, for a specific brand, because that has its own monetization route. But if you're looking to create those additional monetization streams through distribution, then it's all about the story and the entertainment experience.
That's great. I would love to know, just in Booth, and when you say short form, how short were we talking?
Well, they actually had the Booth Series 1 as against the Booth Series 2. Had 3 formats. They had a 10 by 10 minute format, I think 62 by 2 to 3 minute format, and then 5 by half hours.
And it was actually a feature format as well, which you didn't distribute, but Rogers did.
Rogers did, yeah. So wow. The idea here is you almost, with these broadcasters who are taking this, by the way, the Booth sold to Fox around the world, it's sold to TV2 in Denmark, it's TV2 in Norway, it's basically sold in every territory, apart from, I don't think it's sold in Kazakhstan. That's the one gap we have. We're trying hard. The guys at Vuguru are giving us grief on that one. But the idea here is that it gives flexibility for the viewer to engage. And for broadcasters particularly broadcasters who are seeing maybe some of their audience eroded by these new online platforms, they want to communicate with their viewers through any platform possible. Yet the viewing experience is different, although I would argue it's getting more similar, but it is different. And so you have a short form version for online if that's how you prefer viewing, or a half-hour version for TV if that's how you prefer viewing. Obviously, that takes a lot of effort to make sure the scripts work in both formats, and it's more about a script that you chapterize rather than a load of shorts that you film and stick together. That's the key to the success in my mind. But also it drives people from one platform to another, and you have a sort of slightly different catch-up model where you may actually catch up on the story on TV rather than online. You know, if you miss an episode release online, you can catch up with a half hour on TV. But it also, for the broadcasters, it gives different audiences. There's those people who only watch TV and they can see the story, and those people who prefer online and they can see the story.
I think because it's a great question I want to sort of open up to everyone. Can long form work on the internet today? I mean, you guys with Electric City, that's a 22-minute coming out?
Those will be 5-minute episodes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so really, I mean, will a consumer on the internet go for half-hour programming? Like,
Yes.
really go for it?
Absolutely.
I think you can go even beyond that. I think that you can, and there are shows that you can point to that demonstrate that viability. I think that the ones that, I mean, not to keep hitting this point, but the ones that feel like TV are harder to do that. I can think of one show in particular that does at least an hour every day. It's called Day 9 TV, and it's a guy who's one of the top StarCraft players in the world. And every day he wakes up and does a live review of a lot of the professional StarCraft games. StarCraft, if you're not familiar, is a very popular competitive video game. It's a real-time strategy game. So he'll get up and reach out to his audience and say, in a half hour, I'm going to review these games that were played recently. He'll do a live cast, and 50,000 people will watch for an hour. And then he'll put it up as an archive, and he'll get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of downloads of this hour-long program. But the audience that he's appealing to is very invested in this program because he is an expert in a subject where he has the ability to impart on them a certain amount of knowledge in something that they take very passionately.
I agree with him too, because it's with Barrett, because you look at Vice, another great example. They're doing these longer form documentaries, and they've done shorter form versions, and they didn't work as well. So they're going back to longer form, and it's a very specific target, but yet it's very appealing and it's unique in terms of its platform and its audience and its community engagement. And I think it tells the story that you have to know what story you're telling, whether it's reality, unscripted, scripted, and who your audience is and what your platform is. Because we do the same thing. We do long form pieces that Jonathan can sell, and we have partners and the YouTube channel specifically where there probably isn't that longer form play, or it's very specifically designed for shorter chapters.
I absolutely echo that. I think that it's very much platform driven. There are certain platforms that are exclusively interested in longer formats because they can serve mid-roll advertising during that. It's very much part of their business plan, and it's about their programming strategy. I think it's very much informed by the storytelling. Vice is able to do it because they have act breaks. They're using their, traditional sort of 2-hour-long documentaries, and usually about 2 or 3 parts. You see a lot of successful web series that have a total running time that looks quite a bit like a feature, and episodic breaks dictated largely by the platform that they're going to be appearing on. A great example is Machinima.com's Bite Me series, which in its first season was probably about 45 minutes of content. Second series was significantly longer. They reacted to the fans who told them they wanted to see more in each episode. So the second season saw episodic lengths of closer to 15 minutes. And even then they're saying that the audience wants more because you need a satisfying beat in the story to drive the story forward. Even the Bachelor parody, that's up to about 10 minutes per episode, right?
Yeah,
which,
they come in around 8.
Yeah, breaks a lot of rules in comedy, which traditionally used to say get in, get out in 3 minutes. And now if it's based in a storytelling structure that mimics something like The Bachelor, which we all understand how The Bachelor works, that story is served by a longer format.
I think it's becoming a model where for sort of the more general entertainment online experience with video, that platforms like Netflix and Hulu are just another network, even Machinima to some point. And if you've got programming which fits the right audience, for someone like me as a distributor, even with our traditional TV, we may actually be looking at a window that goes online first before to traditional linear television, depending on what the economics look like and the model looks like. But you're seeing those types of platforms competing for those windows because at the end of it, it's all about the entertainment experience again. Now, that entertainment experience may be enhanced online by having the interactivity and, to quote a phrase I hate, transmedia experience around it. Or it may be just a simple linear storyline. It's still interesting. It's still an entertainment experience and can still work online. And I think, particularly as you get your apps on the TV and your connected devices and your tablets, online viewing is a lean-back experience again. It's not a lean-forward experience. And you talked about lengths of viewing increasing. And I think you'll see the sort of format of programming for online start taking that traditional lengths, partly because you can put more ads in and make more money from it. If you're down at the most basic point, if you've got a 5-minute short, you can put an ad up front and you can add behind, but the ad behind won't be watched. If you've got a 22-minute piece, you can put 3 ad breaks with 2 ads in, so you make a lot more money.
So mid-rolls have a much higher completion rate than pre-rolls.
Yeah.
Wow.
Staggeringly higher.
So I think you'll see a specific type of online programming which remains having that interactivity and that sort of format suited to the online and suited to the audience. But then also you'll start seeing more genuine entertainment starting in that space and then moving to traditional media, and original content starting in that space and then moving to traditional media.
And I think the success of long-form online also calls into question the business model that makes most sense for the type of content that it is and the volume that's available for that particular content, and also how the producers would prefer to actually make their money back. I mean, something may make sense in an ad-supported format, especially with all of the innovations that are coming out, skippable ads where users can choose to watch a longer, more targeted ad and have enjoy more viewing time versus maybe some much longer form content, 60 minutes plus, is more suitable in an online rental window. So I really think it depends on what works best.
It's really interesting you guys note this, especially the nuances between platforms. I mean, I think we take it for granted that we understand maybe a Netflix consumer versus a Hulu consumer. But Hulu, they announced all long form in their new slate, I believe. It was 22 and above or close to 22. YouTube said, you guys are, in terms of the new originals, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, some of them really long.
I wouldn't say we've been necessarily greenlighting, feature films, but we're not, and I don't know if we'll go there or not. I mean, I'm not saying either way, but I think it really depends on the channel. I mean, and again, what the tolerance is. There are definitely some, machinima and some very popular channels that have a very niche following, and the fans are very intense, and they may have a higher tolerance for just longer format content, whereas other channels may not. So it really depends on the target audience.
But can I say, I don't know if it really matters the length of the content. It's all about the experience and the entertainment experience, and some are suited to longer format, some are suited to shorter format. As long as you get the views and the views generate the monetization from it, it doesn't really matter.
Sure, but it's still in the development phase. I mean, I've heard a number of producers who sit there, they're like, well, we did a 20-minute episode. Should we chop it into 3, or should we just put it all as 20 minutes? We chop it into 3, we get effectively 3 times the views if you have 100,000 on this episode, 80,000 on this episode, and 80,000 on that. We just did 300,000 views.
3 times the promotional opportunities too. Often, if you're looking at how a lot of the websites promote right now, it's by episode. So, we have Failure Club, which is a program with Morgan Spurlock. It follows 6 New Yorkers who have, in their kind of 40s, who have one goal in life that they hadn't accomplished. And we looked at trying to figure out the best way to lay this out. And each kind of story was following a different person, and we instead of kind of trying to lump them together in a longer form, we do know that there is as much as we can sit here and talk about, it's all about the content and the perfect, at the same time, right now, it's 3 to 5 minutes is what people are watching for the most part. And if you can get a broader opportunity when the person clicks through and doesn't see 18 minutes on the little bar at the bottom, you have to tolerate that to an extent. I mean, I like to think that we keep trying to push our audience in the right spots with the right content, like you said with Burning Love. It's 8 to 10, it's longer. But we should be realistic at least a little bit about what viewing habits are right now.
But just because you, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that said, I firmly believe you can't arbitrarily cut up content just to fit a minute structure. And actually, in a way, that's the beauty of the web, because it's a space that's not beholden to a network schedule in which you need 22 minutes and you need your commercial break here and here. They have that little bit of flexibility. That said, it's the challenge of the storyteller to work in partnership with the platforms that knows their audience better than anyone.
Exactly.
To say that if Yahoo says, we really need this story to work within 5 minutes, to structure that storytelling to fit and to have that flexibility. And more to the point, as far as the direct correlation between digital content and being grown to television content, I think that there's a real opportunity in the idea of IP incubation and understanding the differences between what a digital series is and what the opportunity is to grow that in the traditional media. Like for example, Mortal Kombat, which Warner Brothers did, which looked like a very traditional digital series. 10 episodes, largely each installment very character-based. But that's about franchise building as opposed to direct porting of a digital series onto television. It's about saying, reinvigorating the Mortal Kombat brand from a gaming standpoint, a feature film standpoint, and opening up the opportunity to. I look at that series and I say, well, gosh, they're the same as the X-Men. I could have a whole other franchise based on Sonya Blade or whatever her name is, and additional web series or graphic novels or whatever that looks like. And to begin that conversation in the digital space with good quality scripted content, that's certainly our goal. And I think that there's monetization opportunities in that, and then also ways to inform, what our traditional business is, which is television.
I think we're all saying in some ways similar in that you have to look at the platform and what works, but I do think the thing we haven't talked as much about is it's what the consumers want. And we're finding this on our YouTube channel where we haven't launched it officially, we're in kind of a soft launch, but we put up content that was short because we were like, okay, we're gonna go short form. And our consumers came back, and we actually, on this one show, happened to have like 30 minutes of footage for it, but we cut it down to 7. And they came back and they said, no, longer. So we put up a longer version, no, longer. And the more we made it longer, the better the views got. And so I think you have to look at the content, you have to look at the platform, because, AOL, another great example. We had a show, it's Little Women, Big Cars, it's 100-ish minutes long. We actually put up, it was 17 episodes, it was designed that way. We actually put it all up at once. So we put the entire series up at once so that they could binge on it, but then AOL promoted it like it's new. So there's a question on how you manage consumer expectations when it comes to discovery and marketing, but then you also can satisfy the consumer who says, I love this, let me binge, let me take part of the activity that Hulu and Netflix does such a great job of.
Upload all the individual episodes at once, or did you?
In this case, it was all
one
episodes.
asset? Okay.
So we actually did all episodes, and we saw a very good percentage of the audience watch everything, and then there was another percentage that watch specific shows, and this is an AOL audience. Unique take. There were certain thumbnails that triggered, mostly with the very sexy Antonio Sabato Jr. soccer coach, that got gigantic views, and then there were a number of people who promote, based on one episode, based on how it was promoted. So I think we were trying to cater to the audience and what they wanted in that case, which is very, but we were very unique to AOL in that case, whereas when we do something with Yahoo, we'll be very unique to Yahoo.
I think a lot of trying to predict what different demos want comes into play. I mean, I know programmers who are kind of customizing content towards tweens, for example, they do have some concerns around can I really go over 10 minutes? Does it really have to just be kind of little bites of content here and there? And so I really think it does, you do have to consider your audience and specifically demographics and kind of what's known about those demographics and what studies show.
I think each part of this conversation really differs too, depending on what kind of online content you're planning on producing. Are you planning on producing 10 or 15 or 17 episodes where you've got a limited run and it starts and then it ends? Or are you planning on creating a company that's going to continue to create a certain style of content? Yum Yum F comes to mind, where it's, they are creating a certain kind of content that probably won't be 10 episodes of this, 10 episodes of that, but a continual progression of evolution and reinvestment back into that company as they continually evolve what their offerings are to the audience over a period of 6 months or a year or, hopefully several years.
I think it's a great segue into the discussion around really investing in content producers. I think YouTube is probably taking the lead in this front in terms of driving direct investment in production companies, particularly young ones. Everything from Phil DeFranco's production company to Higa's to, Freddie Wong.
Well.
You've essentially said, here's some money. You don't owe it back. But we want you to produce for us and produce for the platform. And hopefully you will both grow your audience and move to a sustainable way. So my question really is, are they going sustainable? Like, can these companies become sustainable? And I'm curious to know what everybody thinks. Do these entities exist within the economics of the web today? because frankly, we're still talking about a relatively low single-digit CPM. And if the views aren't in the several million per episode, I don't know how that is sustainable. So I'm curious to know what everybody thinks.
Well, we've definitely been working on getting that CPM up from kind of the typical notion of like you said, a low single digit. Our rate card is double digit, and we have a sales team that's kind of rallying around this original programming and going out there and trying to, sell it and make it successful. I think, obviously it's an experimental phase for us as well. Certain channels will perform better than others. I think a lot of it will actually have to do with the producers themselves. How much effort they're putting into, working within the YouTube community. It's been the trend for years that people who engage with the YouTube community more have a consistent release schedule. There are various habits that you can do to ensure better success on YouTube. I think there are also opportunities for cross-promotion if you have producers who are distributing content elsewhere or have other projects in development. We have some producers who have kind of traditional DVD businesses, and they plan to, when it's a suitable genre for the content they're producing for YouTube, they'll put inserts in with their DVDs, right, to promote the web series that they're making available on YouTube. And so I think it will come down to the producer and just whether they're just using various levers to get the word out there and promote the content as well.
Curious to know what everyone else thinks. Is there a sustainable web producer cottage industry that has emerged here that we're seeing happening? I know it's particularly in Los Angeles, New York, and in other cities.
I don't know why there has to be a specific web producer industry. I don't know why there just can't be a producer industry where the producers create content, some of which may go on the web and some of which may go into other media. I think it's a transferable skill set. It's the same skill set.
I think it's going to increasingly become a requirement.
But yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of, what the web sometimes provides is an incubation facility, as Aimee said, where you can test concepts or get concepts to work or build an audience that you can then translate into other media. In terms of the economics and where the economics work, I think, it's still a developing space, but I think some of the returns you're seeing from some of the platforms and portals out there in terms of the ad revenues is definitely increasing. And then you look at models like what I participate in terms of distribution in other territories. It does start moving you in that space towards the TV model, like can you geo-target the original territory rather than having it global, because if you have it global, nobody's going to buy it because it's already been on YouTube and things like that, which becomes an interesting debate between what are the different returns from having it in one territory than having it global. And it also comes down to a windowing model, like can you have it global but only for a short period of time and then sell other windows. But I don't think, I think it'd be wrong to try and really identify a specific web producing community. I think it's sort of the skill set and the media, and as media merge, and as I said earlier, some of these portals are just other networks. There's no need to do that, really.
I think the nice thing about original programming just kind of taking off is that there are digital shops who did get in early and really embrace the web, and they have that skill set, they really know what they're doing, and so it creates an opportunity for entities like these to kind of get in there with the game with traditional media companies, as traditional media companies are also embracing online web. So it's just a bigger, it's kind of a bigger community, and I think the quality of the content online is only going to get better because of that.
You're going to add, and I think I totally agree in that it's one skill set. You're just adding skills to that skill set. So, and depending on what you're producing, if you want to produce a daily vlogs type of show, that's great. It's still a production of a live show or a tape show. You're going to do it every day. You're going to have a very different frequency, so you have to learn to churn and burn on a different level. But how different is that than producing The Tonight Show 5 days a week? Sure, money and scale are different,
right,
but you're still producing compelling content, and that's the key. You have to engage an audience. They have to like what you're doing. You have to find ways to make money, and you want to continue to grow creatively.
I think the biggest question you bring up is economics,
right,
and I think there is a lot of discussion around the budgets for web versus the budgets for traditional media, and whether people with more experience in traditional media can work within that lower budget. And so I do think it is kind of a skill earned over time.
Sure.
To know how to.
But what I think you can see is actually by some of the people working with, so we say, web-based budgets, proving that you can make very strong content, and that type of approach can move into traditional media as well.
I also think it's created a culture of producers who don't just produce or write or direct content. They are producers, writers, actors, marketers, sales reps, and distributors. And this community of people who do all of that. And they know how to game the YouTube system, and they can really inform traditional media on how to grow product online. And it's fascinating to watch, and those are the people who are going to be most successful in their YouTube channels.
It's a great point, because a huge part of the decision is often a lot of the ancillary, like, well, these are other thoughts we've made about how to promote the program beyond. And I don't know, that I don't think was the case in traditional. You didn't have to pitch your show and also talk about your social influence, you know? And now that's part of the story now, at least on digital. And that's a skill set that not every producer in a more traditional manner has.
Well, it's like any other part of producing. Like, not every producer is a writer. And if you don't have that skill set, hire somebody or find somebody who is. Like, don't expect that just because you can produce one content that will immediately translate to another. There's a learning curve.
And you better, the one last thing I'll say is you better be able to pivot instantly. I mean, even in the 2 months of a soft launch on a YouTube channel, we have gone from one idea and we're already 50% to a whole nother concept, and we're reallocating dollars already to what we're seeing works. And so you have to be able to adjust. It's just like being a startup, right? You start with an idea and you probably end up 4 versions later.
You guys framed it exactly perfectly. I think I was going to argue with you, and then you guys are right there agreeing. I mean, really, so it's not, the industry, you've got traditional entities who are having to develop digital divisions who know the rules of the game and can move very quickly, and can do it with, frankly, fewer people, fewer resources per production minute, if you will. I mean, it sounds like what generally is happening is more minutes of content need to be produced, and that per minute the budgets are down. I mean, just it's a contraction of production costs in some ways. Do you guys agree or disagree? I mean, in fact, obviously a minute of television, we're talking, a magnitude of much bigger than maybe 5 to 10 times what a digital minute is.
I think it's very telling, though, that the cost of production on television on a per minute basis is going down, and the cost of production for online is going up. And I think it's a reflection of the maturation of the ad sales industry.
I also think that the digital space is just as diverse as the television space, and that there's certain kind of content that can be produced on a daily reactive, lower budget basis. And then there are series like Cybergeddon, where if you have a sponsor involved, you can involve A-list talent and make something that looks a lot more like TV. And there's a full range of that, just as there's reality programming on television and big budget shows like what you're seeing on HBO and pay channels. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to play around with the middle ground. The Booth at the End is an incredible example of a high-quality show with celebrity auspices that manages the budget by effectively being a bottle show. And so you're focusing on storytelling and character and not blowing your budget on big, crazy stunts and events. And that's one way to tread the middle ground.
We wanted to blow up the booth, but
next season.
Should have hired Freddie W.
Yeah, we should have hired Freddie. We could have done it. I mean, the one thing I will say too is you run into, as you get away from the more daily content and you talk about longer form like Cybergeddon or the Booth, it does become a question of cost of production and dealing with guilds and the realization that the industry is shifting in that struggle. In that, if you look at, we're invested in by Rogers. We've looked at producing in Canada, and the challenge we have is we get great tax breaks. We can do all the things you need to do, but by doing it under the new media agreements, for instance, in the US, we get more shooting days at a lower cost. So you end up having to not only be smart about the content, how you construct it, who your audience is, but also when you're producing it, you have to be really thoughtful. Like the traditional model of, I'll get tax credits may not be the best thing. Maybe you should shoot it in LA or wherever it is, because even though it costs, in theory, more, it's actually lower, you'll get more days, et cetera.
That's fascinating. And in fact, we could probably have a whole discussion just about what exactly the unions are doing to adapt to sort of new realities of what, frankly, the day rates cannot be the same as on television, but are we going to start to see standards and so forth? But I'd love to take a shift into the demand on the brand side. Who's actually paying for a majority of this content as well? Obviously, there's international TV distribution and windows. I'd love to get into that as well. Let's start with brands. Over at YouTube, at least from the outside looking in was the perception that a lot of your big brand partners said, hey, we love what you guys do, you have the biggest audience, but we'd love to see a little more premium. What are the brands really asking for? And was there really sort of this uncomfortableness with the UGC and unlicensed clips?
So I would say that the brands are looking for a wide range of kind of content offerings depending on what their goal is. I mean, obviously we're getting proposal requests regularly. We have a sales team that's also proactively pitching. We've had brands align with some of our YPP stars who are, I wouldn't say not well known, but I would say they're less traditional than some of the other kind of premium traditional media brands on YouTube. We've also had advertisers who are interested in doing general buys to target a demographic, and that can include, if they want to target film and animation, it can include some of the film partners that we have on YouTube, major studios, but it can also include some kind of independent animators, particularly in Canada. There's a big animation community in Canada, and so they will do buys to target a specific content vertical on YouTube or target a specific demographic. We also have advertisers looking for sponsored kind of exclusive experiences. I mean, we had State Farm, for example, sponsored the live stream of the Coachella Music Festival, and so we have live stream exclusive opportunities, we have exclusive sponsorship opportunities on channels, sponsoring contests that include not only content coming from a traditional partner, for example, like Jimmy Kimmel Live, but also coming from users that are submitting videos as part of a contest. So it really varies. I think the UGC element helps us, but it depends on what the advertiser's looking for.
What are you guys hearing in terms of brands? Obviously at the end of the day, they are still writing a lot of the checks that fuel the platforms to go and fund content. Yahoo has terrific brand partners. You're seeing some of those are branded entertainment deals, straight series that are brand is integrated.
Yep.
How are they responding as well to the non-brand entertainment?
Yeah. I think some of it's going well, but some of it's still a challenge. I think we'll continue to do the branded entertainment. P&G does the Thread, which was just renewed for like the 5th year in a row, which is a long time for a sponsorship of a show. Mm-hmm. At the same time as we kind of pull our slates out, I think one problem, I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this too, and I hope they're the same because they're painful, is that a lot of there's still a split on the buying side in the agency between television and digital. And a lot of the thought process about how to buy premium content comes from a new media display advertising perspective. So even though you're buying your spot against a really highly watched premium programming, you're like, well, where's my toilet paper gonna show up in it? Because the mindset is still this kind of comes from a banner ad style, branded entertainment, get my product integrated. And if you buy across you buy The Office, it doesn't mean your glad bags necessarily get it. If you buy a 30-second spot, they don't get in the show necessarily. So I think it's a hurdle we have, and some of that I think is in the measurement, because traditional TV buyers are still not quite sure how to figure it all out as they buy. And I think some of the digital folks are still thinking a little bit antiquated in how we're going to make this stuff.
So this was one of the first years. Upfronts in digital have been around for a couple of years now, but this was the first year I think that upfronts seemed to really pop in terms of the sheer volume of brands that were participating. Are they starting to look at this? And I think Brian, you brought up a good point. Is this just cheaper content for them, or are they actually starting to see the value that there's real audience, this is the audience we want to reach, and therefore we value this almost on the same level as television? I'm curious to know, anyone at upfronts have a sort of response that showed that we're moving towards a higher CPM?
I guess what I would say is that I don't think they necessarily see it as a cheaper buy, like lower CPMs. I think it's just a matter of determining what percentage of their budget they're allocating to it. And I think there are, some advertisers and some buyers out there that are still more in the experimental phase and, allocating a certain amount and just kind of seeing how it goes. But I wouldn't say, against, average CPMs for television that they're necessarily thinking of it as cheaper.
Okay.
I think you run into, Vuguru sits in this weird place where we support our platforms, whether it's AOL or Yahoo, and in the early days we sold directly against our shows, and we actually dialed that back as it evolved so that they bought platforms, which makes sense. When I was at Xbox and we were doing original content, they bought Xbox Live, they didn't buy the show. That makes a lot of sense to us, but I think Brian's specifically right. It's the 26-year-old buyer who's going to be tracked against what the CPM was, what the efficiency of that buy, the effective CPM. I mean, all of those pieces, which is very different than what you might hear from the client or even a senior advertiser, and they'll say, well, we want to do this, it's going to be really experimental. We have a great story. We're sitting in an advertiser, and I won't say who it is, but they said to us, they're like, we want subtle, we'll do some integration, but we really just want to be a part of great content, and we don't want to be in the middle of it. And literally out of their mouth a minute later, he said, but what we'd like to do? We'd like to have a show about the behind the scenes of our company. And it was complete opposite of what they had said before. We're like, but and I think you still have a lot of that. Buying AMC is safe. No one's getting fired to buy Mad Men, in theory. Whereas yet there are shows on YouTube, even just using YouTube alone, that have 3, 4, 5 times the weekly or daily views of Mad Men. And yet they won't buy against it.
So it's still an education process, really, for everybody here, working with brands who are just weaning them off of that television product that has been sold for.
I think you're seeing the movement anyway. You look in the UK, and the stats last year that Google's ad revenues exceeded ITV, which is the biggest commercial free channel in the UK. So the point that, when you're getting to the point that brands are spending more money on Google in the UK than they are on ITV, the biggest commercial channel with 25% of the viewing audience, you're getting a significant shift is happening.
That's great.
I think a lot of it's who you're talking to. You're right, though. If it's the 26-year-old, media planner whose first question is the CPM, or are you talking to the CMO? There's a big difference there.
If that 26-year-old media planner gets one shot to get it right, he makes the bad bet, or the bet that he can't justify to his boss of you would have done this same thing, and he's no longer a 26-year-old media planner.
But it is shifting. I mean, it's definitely getting better. And I do think we've heard, at least from AOL and some others, that they are seeing more shifting of those dollars, and they saw a lot of excitement out of the new fronts, and they were able to get a lot more buys. So, our chairman constantly says it's kind of that tipping point where you're seeing acceleration. We're seeing it in terms of content acquisition, licensing. It does feel like we're almost there, but you're still fighting a little bit of that uphill battle.
I think it's a lot more viable to work with content that already has a dedicated viewership versus integrating brands into a new piece of content for so many different reasons, not the least of which is, as Scott pointed out, subtlety is antithetical to brand integration. The more subtle it is, the less of an impression it makes on the audience, and therefore the less viable it is as an advertising platform. But that's one of many different issues I have with branded entertainment.
But can we, ask about Cybergeddon? Because Cybergeddon comes with a Norton integration.
Yep.
Now, did the studio set that up, or did that come with video? Yahoo set that up.
Yeah, so there's a couple integrations. Cybergeddon is a show with Anthony Zeiker, who's the creator of the CSI franchise that we have coming out this fall. It's a thriller about cybercrime in very much his style. And there's a couple integrated sponsors into it, and one of them came with the program to us, which was Norton, which is obviously a very logical, easily integrated into the show. And so that was actually that came connected to the program already, I think, with CAA's involvement. So. Which is, we were not pissed about that, right? Like, hey, here's your sponsor already. That helps if anyone wants to pitch a show in the future.
and so part of their sponsorship included the integration and the media buy on Yahoo.
Yeah.
Because as a studio, that's a challenge for us, where we understand that there's available funds in sponsorship, and yet we probably would need to work in lockstep with the potential sponsor within the development process, and then with the distributor, because we can't be in the business of selling your media.
No, I mean, there's challenges to work out, but there's money there, so we'll figure it out, you know, as opposed to the other way around, where it's like, let's hit the streets and we're talking to a 26-year-old media planner.
I'm glad you brought that up, Aimee. I mean, I'm hearing that a lot as well, even on Hulu and other places. If you're going to bring them a produced piece of brand entertainment, you better bring them the brand doing a media buy as well for a significant amount. And this is what the platforms need to sustain their business and to give you that kind of front page promo. That's interesting, and I think, you know, it becomes more than on the early stages of development. You have to integrate the platform, it sounds like. You have to sit down with Yahoo and say, you know, just package the whole thing together.
Well, the question is, do you wait to produce it for that sponsor? And that's, I mean, especially if you're in a situation like UCP or even Vuguru, we're funding it and we're generally moving ahead, and we're saying to partners or advertisers, we would love to have you part of it, but we're not going to hold up the train to do it.
And that's why it's driven out of storytelling for us, that we're trying to tell the stories that we think that we would get distribution partners for, and not make content that would be a turnoff for a potential advertiser if they're going to be buying against a vertical. And then in success, hopefully there's opportunity to integrate in future seasons because we've worked together on a show that appeals to a certain category of people.
And great, that's great. But also, if you have someone who wants to pay for it, that's better.
That's the best scenario if you have someone to start.
I think on our end, you know, we also want to take into consideration how evergreen that makes the content then, whether you can, you know, continue to basically bring in sponsors, not necessarily sponsors, but I'd say advertisers who are looking to run ads on content to target a specific demo or a specific vertical. That may include, you know, prior series, and if they're, and we do, you know, there is content with product placement on YouTube. I'm not saying that there isn't, but I think it's something to take into consideration whether that piece of content is then evergreen and continue to be included in future ad buys. Say if you're in series, you know, the fourth season, can that sponsor or that advertiser also run ads against season 1?
Sure, and I mean, it totally depends on the content.
Yeah.
You know, for this is like a one-off. There may be another opportunity for something with this down the road, but you know, we have ongoing series, we have one-off series, we have events. So I totally agree with you. And we like this script, we like this show. Norton just happens to be integrated and helping us.
I think on the, just if I can chime in on the original programming side, what we did is we did, you know, analysis and researching into beforehand kind of what, when we were greenlighting channels, like essentially what kind of demographics or special interest areas we wanted to target. And then we kind of greenlit original programming that would cater to that, but it wasn't necessarily with upfront, you know, sponsorship or product placements already kind of laid out for the programming.
I'd love to shift gear. Eventually we're going to open this up. We have about a half an hour left, so we're going to give about 20 minutes to you guys, all your questions. I'd love to quickly hit 2 points, one with Jonathan. The other piece, get us shifting away from brands into actually windowing and taking it into territories. A much more traditional look at entertainment, which is something that digital's always struggled with a little bit. We're releasing these platforms, Yahoo, YouTube, everybody, these are global platforms. Yet, so essentially you're dumping a lot of content into one single window and just sending it to essentially the lowest window possible. The entertainment industry, of course, has thrived in taking from high-value windows and taking them down until you get to sort of free cable and free basic TV. So with digital properties, what's the deal on geo-blocking, and is that going to be a trend that actually increases?
Well, I mean, if you actually look at all the Vuguru properties we distribute, you know, Rogers controls Canada, Vuguru do their own distribution in the US, and we do all the distribution outside the US. So there may be a time as we discuss a multiple territory deal to do jointly with Vuguru. But primarily what they're doing is selling to partners in the US who will geo-target, and then we're selling to partners in other territories who will geo-target. And it's a traditional TV model. You sell to a channel in that territory. That channel might be in a number of territories, but you're selling specific territories. What I'd say with digital programming is the same can apply. because by geo-targeting to the originating territory or the funding territory, there are additional monetization opportunities. However, at the same time, I completely recognize that the YouTubes of the world, the Yahoos of the world, are in more than one territory. And it really comes down to a matter of fact that if that series, if that piece of digital programming is going to be made available on a global basis through a YouTube or a Yahoo or in a multiple territory basis, is it actually being monetized in all those other territories? If you've got something that's going on YouTube, yes, it's being monetized in the US. Is it being monetized in Germany, France, even if it's in English language, in the UK, in Australia? If it is, great, take that money and run because it's more money and it's guaranteed, it's confirmed revenue. If it's not, why have it available in those other territories? Why not geo-target it and then do further distribution with the local platforms? Yahoo is obviously extremely strong in the US, and they have a presence in other territories as well. If I was somebody licensing to Yahoo, I'd say, okay, how much money am I going to get for this property from the UK, from Australia, from Japan? And then sort of look at that against what I can get from those territories by licensing or working or even getting local sponsors and advertisers. I think one of the big issues with brand integration is it works very much in territory or regional areas, but it's very rare you can get a brand that wants to pay money to be integrated worldwide because marketing budgets sit locally or advertising budgets sit locally. And sometimes those brands aren't available in all territories. State Farm is only in the US, So I think it's really sort of a pragmatic look at it on a case-by-case basis. If you're a producer or if you're working on that, if you are going to work with a platform and they want all those territories, are they giving you the money that justifies it? If they are, great, take it. Are they making advertising and monetization in those other territories? If they are, great, take it. If they're not, have the conversation about geo-targeting, have the conversation about additional distribution. If the content is in a format that appeals to the international audience. Obviously, if it's a very local US feel or local Canadian feel, then it's not going to sell,
But isn't that going out of your way to create a poorer user experience and define the expectations of your consumers?
Why?
Well, the expectation of a piece of online content is that it will be available globally, that it won't be locked off to certain territories.
Who says that's the expectation? I don't, If
2 billion connected internet users.
Well, I don't necessarily think they are. I don't think, if something is being promoted in a territory via another platform, well, what's the difference? If a user, maybe the US user base are more in tune with using YouTube, but someone in Russia is more in tune choosing with a Russian portal. So you would rather go to that Russian portal you're used to using to view that content than going to YouTube.
But your content experience isn't on a single portal. Your content experience is the viewing platform, the discussion platforms, the various social media extensions, whether or not they're extensions, but those conversations, and your user interaction. So whether or not they're viewing it on Yahoo or a Russian portal, they may or may not be hearing and seeing the conversation on Twitter and on Facebook because our personal connections aren't locked down to single territories either.
No, I understand that.
There's nothing more frustrating than having a friend say, this is the most amazing thing, you should check it out, content not available in your territory.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you're the producer and you want to make that monetization opportunity, as a producer, you also have to look at a point of view that, do I want to make money from this content in the other territories? And actually what you can do is create the excitement. We worked on Reese, which was a Canadian production that originally appeared on YouTube. The first 5 episodes went up there. We worked with the producers to take it down. We can actually distribute it to other platforms. And there was an existing audience who got excited by it. We took it down. Yes, there was a bit of concern, but then what we actually told them is there's 5 more episodes coming. We're editing the whole lot and putting it in associate homes, which was sci-fi in the US, space in Canada, sci-fi internationally. And yes, the US launched first, and there was a clamor saying, when are we going to get the rest of it in Europe, which actually built up the value for the platform, sci-fi internationally, because they had an audience waiting for it to come. So, it's a fair point, but then, the viewers are important in monetizing, but also viewers can't prevent monetization happening as well.
Right.
I think we are concerned about, we, for example, are concerned about user experience, and we, of course, would like content to be available everywhere. There are just, some realities that you kind of have to work with in terms of distribution windows or even rights. An example would be BBC, right? Will put it'll make it content available on YouTube that can't necessarily be made available outside of the UK until a certain period of time. And I think at that point, the challenge is at the platform level to make sure that given those circumstances that you have to work around, there aren't poor user experiences. For example, is the channel visible and then you click on a video, you know, you can see the thumbnail, but you click on a thumbnail and you get some error message? Or is it more kind of an experience where users aren't going to run into dead ends like that, you know, if you've kind of cleaned up the experience for them, given the fact that certain content may not be available to them?
It's a traditional issue with, you know, traditional media, television and piracy, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, what you're sort of saying is, if I took your argument to the next extension, that it's a bad viewer experience if I can't see it wherever I am. You know, that's what pirates argue when they're sort of downloading content illegally. I wanted to watch it, it's not available in my territory yet. So it's the same argument, and it all comes back about, you know, can those producers make money in all the territories and the different windows? Right. It may well be the best route to monetization is a global release for a specific window.
I'm gonna make myself the most hated man in the room right now and say, I'm gonna quote a incredibly brilliant guy named Gabe Newell. He's the CEO of a software company called Valve Software. It's one of the most forward-thinking video game companies on the planet. They're also the leading digital distributor of all video game content. And he had a great quote which said, "Piracy is a service issue." And they have found the video game industry has been just as racked by piracy as every other aspect of entertainment, possibly more so. And what they found is that by creating a better user experience with their product called Steam, which was a digital distribution and upgrading system which would keep all of your content in the cloud. You could download it to any computer you wanted. They would periodically update it so that you had the most compatible and most current version without you having to think about it. Sales increased dramatically. I would argue that also the iTunes' success is a reflection on that. It was far easier when iTunes was created to pay 99 cents for a song than to go on LimeWire and try and pick through the dozen or so shitty versions that you got. So I think that piracy is truly, more than anything else, a service issue and a reflection of, you can say expectation, or you can say that it's people being cheap, which I'm sure, you know,
I don't disagree, but if you go back to the point I was originally making, which is all about, are you monetizing in different territories and how you can do that? You know, if that service issue is that you make that digital series available via a platform worldwide, if I'm the producer, I want to make sure it is being monetized worldwide. Correct. And if it's not, then I want to look at other monetization opportunities in the territories, which leads to geo-targeting. So I agree with you, it is a service issue, but it's also a monetization.
Well, and it depends what your goal is as a producer. I mean, we've had discussions with Machinima, and we have a great relationship with Machinima, and everyone wants to work together. But the challenge has been, Machinima is very upfront. We get 40 to 50% of our views of our content come internationally. We generally, the monetization's pretty low on that, but that the excitement that's driven around the IP comes from those international views. You have a lower view count, so your IP maybe is not as valuable. If we had a project that we were very concerned about creating a big IP, we might take the lower monetization, put it out globally in a short window, and then figure out how to do additional windows, and that makes total sense. But if we have a piece that we don't think it's necessarily a franchise like Mortal Kombat or Bite Me, and is more targeted, that might not make sense to us, because we're not going to make the money back, and then in the end, if you're not making money, you're not going to continue to produce. And so I totally agree with you. I'm the consumer who complains when I can't get whatever it is I want instantly, but yet the reality is, how do you balance those two things?
I think that this will be the last thing I say, because I don't want to dominate the panel.
We'll give a fight later.
Yeah, we'll just put on gloves and go at it. I think that the other thing that you have to do also is make sure that your business model conforms to the realities of the modern world and not what you want the modern world to be like. And I think that that's a underutilized idea. The entertainment has shifted dramatically in the past 5 years, let alone the past 20 or 30 or 40. And that whatever you're creating now has to be a reflection of the modern landscape of content consumption. It cannot just hold on to the vestiges of the way that things used to be, or it will fail.
Thank you guys for being civil about this. This is really one of the unresolved science parts of the new economics, really, is that debate of whether, do you let global once, or do you, to drive buzz, raise value of the IP, there's one school of thought, or the consumer is or the other, or package it out into windows and get more value in each market, as opposed to a low CPM in Turkey.
But you can also do things like, I'm not against, don't get me wrong, I'm not against the global release of a property. You give a window for a limited period of time, and then you may put it into other windows, and there's an added value, slightly different component, extra material. an additional episode, something like that, which adds value to that window as well, or for a purchase mechanism, or for a slightly different viewing experience. So there are ways around that make it work as well.
Well, I want to open it up to you guys. Just have at these guys. And they're not afraid to be honest.
Yeah.
So here, we've got a microphone going around. So.
Yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts were in terms of advertising agencies becoming more like entertainment producers. And I was sort of thinking the Nike spot that was done with the Black Mamba thing, and the Conan O'Brien spot done for American Express. And now that the agencies have a lot more, there's a lot more footprint that you can actually put in media than traditional television. Do you think that could happen? I mean, you were talking about branded entertainment, but what about advertising entertainment?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because obviously advertising has learned a lot from branded entertainment, but I think the challenge is still, getting the views and getting the shares and getting the content out there. And aside from advertising alone, I mean, there are companies like ShareThrough and Unruly Media who are kind of cropping up to really address that problem. I think it's great to see this experimentation, but I think that's only kind of part of the game. I think you really, to get something to go viral, it's kind of a science, it's kind of not. I mean, it's a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of work to be done to get that to happen.
There are not a lot of Red Bulls that can transition their product brand into a media brand. And Red Bull's a great instance because they built it around a passion. It didn't happen overnight. So. And it's hard to, again, the focus, what is the focus of that brand? It's that long-term vision. There are not a lot of companies that have that.
I agree. So I was just going to say, I think that you can nail it with like a lot of one-offs sporadically, but for like every, if you saw the Kyrie Irving Pepsi Max video, is awesome, right? It's, for every one of those, there's like 50 you haven't seen. And I still think it's because the single goal is, in the end, how are they promoting how are they making an ad? It's not about what are the content. And sometimes they nail it where they intersect, but I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think the brands generally make really shitty entertainers. I think that they're really good. I mean, it's not their strong suit and it's not their stated goal. Their stated goal is to sell a product. I think that some brands have figured out that they can give you an experience that you otherwise wouldn't have and can entertain you first, and the only reason you're being entertained is because that brand created it and allowed it. I think the Old Spice campaign where they put out like 72 videos in a 24-hour period or something like that, but they were very personalized and they were talking to people on Twitter and then would make a specific video for you and upload it. I think that's fantastic because you are their primary purpose was not to make sure that the brand was first and foremost, it was to entertain you. Nobody wants to be sold. People want to be entertained.
We have one over here.
Hi. You mentioned that I think you said I think it was the Vuguru guy said that the conventional agreements with the guilds are not tailored to the production needs that you have. Is that correct? And what would you like to do about it?
Well, no, it's not that they're not tailored. You have to work with where they are. I think you're just seeing the struggle between what is earned and was earned over many years with TV and film, and that you had a structure that worked really well at the budgets we are. Now you're dealing with product that's being distributed and monetized at different levels. And so the new media agreement in the US works very well for us. We work within the guild structure. We've hired WGA writers before. We will work within that. But then as you try to figure out how to produce things and keep it at their lower budgets, if you want to take advantage of some of the more traditional financing, you end up struggling with that. How many days can you get to shoot? What are the credits? How does that work against? Do you have to hire certain people? Does it make sense to hire a guild still photographer or not? Where do you want to do it? Because we're supportive. We want to be partners with all the guilds. It's just how we also need to hit our finances. So it's always that balance between those two.
It's interesting. Well,
Guys, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm with the Directors Guild. When do you want to sit down?
Afterwards, it's fine. We have a good relationship with all of them. So it's just a matter of we're always wanting to work as closely as we can within the agreements that exist now and watching them evaluate. As they evolve, they will evolve, and we'll continue to evolve with them.
Yeah, I can only speak to what I've seen in the U.S., and generally the climate seems to be very much open arms with well, it was SAG and AFTRA now together, but a very, I don't know if it was so friendly for maybe the actors. The rates weren't certainly as high, but it's certainly getting them under the umbrella of a union production and just saying there's some basic work conditions and insurance requirements and just getting the sort of craziness out and then establishing a relationship with the producers and then start to talk down the road about minimums. I mean, right now there's still no minimums as far as I know in digital. There's just sort of norms.
There are for derivative productions, but for originals,
Okay.
it's still open.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Okay, first, before I ask my question, I just want to say that the Writers Guild of Canada will work with you on digital products. But my question is this. Barrett has pointed out that for the best consumer experience, maybe having distribution pay or having brands pay won't yield the best experience for the consumer. So what about the revenue streams from the audience themselves?
I think there are a number of different ways that can take off, and I do think that it will ultimately become a very viable way of creating sustainable content. As it stands right now, I don't think that there's any reason to, I don't want to say that. As it stands right now, I think it's a harder argument. As that becomes the default viewing experience, meaning something that you can interact with, something that is not strictly a smaller mirror of the linearity of television. As televisions become more application aware and you can sell content as the application itself or content as the experience itself and get that directly to people in a very, very easily consumed, very easily understood business model, that will become increasingly viable. I think should Google TV and Apple TV create that environment where you can just have a production company or a studio or a network as an application on a television next to Fox and HBO and BBC, that is where the next Fox and HBO and BBC will come from. And they will be able to create sustainable content. They will be able to reinvest back into their content as a whole. And they will be able to experiment and have direct interactions with their audience of, we created this, we're going to give it to you for free. If you like it, there are more that you can pay for, or you can help us create more. And I think that that relationship with your audience will become increasingly viable.
I'm glad you brought up the question, though. It was something that we didn't get to talk about with subscription models and direct consumer purchasing. Everything from like Aziz Ansari and Louis C.K. selling direct to consumer. And also, you take something like Freddie Wong on Kickstarter. I mean, God, for Video Game High School, he was trying to raise an additional like $70K or something. In 48 hours, it was like $125K raised via Kickstarter. And that was going direct to his audience as well. So I think we're just seeing like a few of these, but no, there's no sustainable model that I've seen that's just you can do again and again and again.
Well, I think it's going to require a lot of experimentation and a lot of failure before you get to that sustainable model.
Yeah. Who else over here?
Hi, I wonder if I can press a couple of you guys for some numbers. What of the people that are actually writing checks to commission content, I guess that's Yahoo and Vuguru and maybe one other, what would be the top dollar you've paid for content, and what would be the average dollar per minute that you'd pay to a producer to get something going?
I'm going to let Brian answer that.
I'm not answering that. It's a total range. I mean, I'm not going to talk about our budgets of our shows. So, I mean, more per episode, you know, we'll see things higher with bigger talent, bigger folks involved, bigger production elements, upwards in 50, 60K an episode. We have daily shows that are under 1,000 to make, so it really runs the gamut, and it really depends, like anything, on what we're making.
Yeah, I mean, our budgets overall average about $500,000 for 100 to 110 minutes of content, but it definitely varies in terms of project.
And I'd say for us, we've probably seen, obviously programming is different depending on the channel. Some channels have a more frequent release schedule or longer format content, so that's going to depend. But, I would say like the average cost per minute has been, relatively similar across the channels and less than, what you've seen in traditional television. That's all I'll say.
I'll say as an impartial here, consistently seeing 3 to 5K reported a lot as average per minute in digital. Seems to be shifting a little bit upwards, but again, it depends on the content. It depends if it's a green screen hosted versus, video game high school, what Freddie Wong was going on creating real scripted action. So, it's a good question though.
Hi there. I get the impression that advertisers, when they want to connect to web series and whatnot that's already established, they're mostly interested in how many eyeballs am I going to get, and that's the end of the interest. Whereas I would wager that there's value in the value of those eyeballs seeing their brand integration or logos or whatever it's going to be. When it comes to a show, like you've mentioned some shows where you've got avid fans that want the show and begging for it, and I've got that happening too. Does that mean anything to advertisers yet? That their involvement is going to be more than just a pair of eyeballs? I hope I made sense there.
Well, I mean, it's, obviously it's like the kind of classic debate over kind of a brand campaign versus one that's intended to induce conversion. It's a hard thing to necessarily do. There's certain kind of tricks that partners on YouTube can use, annotations that link to something, or driving more engagement. But I do think we've seen advertisers paying attention to the metrics, like the indicators on YouTube of very popular content creators, and more importantly, the size of the fan base that they have following them. Advertisers are paying more attention to how many subscribers a certain channel has, or how many views on average their videos are getting, as opposed to what overall, or one particular. They kind of want to know, is this creator consistent? Are they consistently driving tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views per video? In terms of conversion to a specific action, that gets a little bit more tricky to kind of.
But what if the quality of? I can have it back. But what if the quality of the audience engagement, like that, you're talking about sheer numbers, right? Whereas I'm saying that if,
I'm talking about predictors of influence.
How are you measuring? How are you measuring the quality of engagement?
Well, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that.
Well, I will say, we've seen a lot of experimentation with the actual, pre-roll and mid-roll units themselves. There are advertisers who, outside of just meeting kind of our standard ad specs, have hired an agency to produce kind of an interactive ad where people can click through, and there's been a lot of innovation on that front to get users actually engaging within the pre-roll. Actually, I was at a breakfast earlier this morning, and one of the people I was talking to is telling me about the new Madagascar ad, which kind of has those elements. It's the pre-rolls directly targeted at the viewer and asks them to kind of engage and play a little game within the pre-roll. But outside of that, things that people are, things that advertisers are doing to specifically engage, those users who are seeing their ads, it's really tough to say, what's a higher quality kind of experience for a user seeing an ad.
I think the best measure of the quality of those viewerships is the ROI on the overall ad spend, and what's the conversion rate, and what are they trying to accomplish. Some advertisers are only going to care about impressions. Some advertisers are going to care about conversions. Blip did speaking of interesting ads, Blip did a really interesting one with a video game publisher, where you could put in your Xbox Live handle while you were watching this video on your laptop, and it would download the demo to your Xbox. And you could directly correlate the interest of the viewer with the overall experience. And at that point, once you're playing the demo, it's up to the game itself to get you to buy.
I would chime in just to say that I think most advertisers or media buyers who are starting to look at like maybe taking a chance on a series or taking it to the next level, they are more sophisticated. They're looking at comment streams, likes. I think what Kelly was saying, they're looking at all the other metrics beyond just views. If your likes are at like 6,000, and you had 10,000 views, but the people were highly engaged and you had like 3,000 comments, that, I mean, I know that would strike a lot of interest as almost an undiscovered gem. And in sort of my world, I would be like, let's do something with this and promote it further. So I think you can sell them on that kind of engagement. All right, so we have, how much time do we have left? We probably have a minute or so, 5 minutes, good. Anyone else have anything fun?
I think it's Kelly. Kelly, we've seen great growth with the launch of the 100 channels that YouTube has funded in the United States. And there's been great talk over the conference about how powerful YouTube is as a global audience. Do you have any plans to finance channels anywhere else in the world, like Canada?
It's a good question. I mean, you know, obviously we're always kind of looking into things and, you know, seeing what's next in you know, as we try to kind of move the needle forward on original programming. I think, you know, at the moment we're kind of still waiting to see how everything works out. I mean, we still have a number of channels that are going to be launching over the summer and into the fall. And so I really couldn't give you a specific answer on that, but it's definitely something that we don't rule out.
Well, I mean, rather than unnecessarily drag it out, I want to, if there's anyone else who has a question for all, like now or forever hold your peace, I want to thank all of the panelists here. I want to thank the Banff Media Festival, World Media Festival, for hosting us, for having us, introducing us to this amazing Canadian production community. I mean, I've met so many different interesting people and fascinated by what's going on north of the border. So thank you for having us. And thank all of my panelists. So thank you, guys.